welcome to the finale, the end, fine. The last episode for the year, just doing what did you call it, Tim, in your email?
I use the Latin term post-mortem.
Ah, yes, for dead body.
I don't after dead body.
Yeah. I
Good start, guys.
think,
Strong.
well, I think a body is post-mortem.
I'm not a Latin
So we
expert.
we have on currently is it surprise champion or not surprise? It is a very confusing thing for me to have wrapped my head around, because in one way it's not surprising at all because it's Ross. In another way it is surprising because he wasn't the best team all year. So Ross, I'll leave it to you. Your reaction. I'll give you the ultimate sideline reporter question. You just won the championship. How does
Disney
that
World
make you
question.
feel?
It's the Disney World question.
Yeah.
Honestly, relieved. Tim and I were just talking about, like, he's like, you didn't have a championship, and we ended on the term of modern era. I have these like pre-league switchover championships that I guess kind of don't count because there were only 10 teams and our history got lost. I still count them.
There's some of us that won none of those, Ross.
So it feels good to have. It feels like a relief. It feels like a stamp of approval that I have a Super Bowl, a modern era championship.
So my question, because this would be something that I would have struggled with if I were to have won. So to put myself in your shoes, does it take anything away from it how good Libby's team was the entire year?
For me, I feel like no, because I feel like what happened to Libby happened to me at least twice. So I'll take it. And I'm not gonna, I actually have, so I was thinking about this and I have a little bit of like a unified, I tried to think of like a unified theory of fantasy championships. And I wasn't able to get to like spend as much time scrolling through as I could have, but I think that generally it's good to be in the middle of the pack, in the middle of the season, because it forces you to make moves that you might not have made otherwise. For me this year, for instance, like I don't win the championship without Jerick McKinnon. I don't know if I would have starting him if I didn't lose some running backs. I probably don't win the championship without Christian Watson. He didn't do a lot in the last couple of weeks, but I'm not paying $27 on him if Cooper Kupp didn't get hurt. It was just like desperation moves, and that ended up working out. So for me, I end up like, I'm a stagnant bench guy. It's just like, I drafted these guys. I'm very attached. I just don't like cycle through. And you just don't get a lot of guys that play the whole season really well, except for Patrick Mahomes, I guess. So maybe that's actually the unified theory, is like just draft Patrick Mahomes.
What a wonderful segue. That I keep thinking back to that moment during the draft where everybody, like, I think Patrick Mahomes got put up and everybody was like making fun of how I look or talk like the people who were being put up. So there was like jokes going around about how I sound like Patrick Mahomes, and everybody was laughing about that. And while everybody was laughing about that, you snuck through Patrick Mahomes for $9 and everyone was like, "Oh, wait a minute. What just happened?"
Yeah, on my side, it was a real like, it's happening. Like, keep talking about Tim.
Yeah, I think the other part of that was, I think there was enough of us that were just like, I'm not drafting Patrick Mahomes. And none of us thought like, well, I would draft him if I could get him for $9. And I think that I know for sure that when he got put up on draft night, I walked away from my computer. Like I was in my kitchen, like doing something else, because I'm like, I don't need him. Like, whatever. I hope he gets bid up to a decent amount. And then I came back and you had gotten him. And I was like, whoa, I should have stuck around.
I think he also came really late in the run of quarterbacks that, like, a lot of people had already spent a bunch of money on quarterbacks. So they were just like, I'm not in. It was just lucky.
Yeah, for Allen to go for as high as he did, and then Mahomes to go at what he did, it was. I think everybody wanted Allen, even at the $20 mark, and nobody was like, I would also want Mahomes, even if it got to 20.
Yeah, I think like, I don't know, Josh Allen does have that rushing upside that, or has more like of a connotation with the rushing upside that you don't necessarily think about with Mahomes. That I think he's like feels like the more attractive quarterback to get. But Patrick Mahomes is really good.
Yeah.
Is he going to be your
best
keeper next
player,
year?
And thinking about it,
$14 for Patrick
not?
Mahomes is not a bad deal.
I think it'd be a little bit higher. I think it'd be closer to 17. But
Because you got him for
Either
what,
way.
9?
9, yeah.
And then that's 10.
I'm
plus
tempted to,
5.
because I think it might be the secret. Going back to my fantasy champion theory, like I kind of base that on the fact that pretty much every year a team that's like around 500 wins.
Yeah.
So
Well,
maybe there's something to that. I don't know.
So I wanted to talk about just a little bit, and it's really hard to talk about, but it's also like this humongous elephant in the room that like fantasy playoffs are very dumb. But there's really no way to have a different non-dumb thing decide who's the winner at the end of the year, unless you just like, I think I had floated this a couple weeks ago, have like a regular season champion and then a playoff champion. But even then, it hasn't been that way. So the regular season champion is just going to be a second tier champion. But do either of you guys have any thoughts on like the playoffs, like how they decide who largely to an extent runs the league next year?
I think, all I can really do is add to your complaining, because the games at the end of the NFL
I'm not
season
complaining, I'm pointing out.
All right, well, I'll complain about it, because the games at the end of the NFL season, week 16 and 17, are so weird, because you have teams who are out of it, teams who are in the playoffs and not trying, and players who are getting hurt or going on IR. And there's just so many weird players to have to start for a fantasy football league championship, like Jerick McKinnon, for instance, who is like really good, but not on anybody's radar all year long. So I think that the NFL is set up really weird to correlate to fantasy football championships. And that's why I think you don't always have the best teams win, because a lot of it is really just dumb luck and finding that guy at the end, the obscure guy who can get you 20 points.
I think we were really, I'm not trying to defend my championship, but maybe I am. I think we actually, like a lot of the teams that ended up having guys out at the end didn't happen to be on our championship rosters, or in that last 4. I don't think that had a huge effect this year.
We had games canceled and it didn't mess our playoffs up.
Right. And that was something that I was like, I'm glad you guys waited a week for this, because it just felt like this is all kind of stupid. A guy might die from this. But even that, like, again, I was kind of thankful not to have that the a-hole part in the back of your brain that's just like, but what happens in the championship though? I was thankful to not have that to worry about. So I think we kind of dodged a lot of the late season, like weird no starts and stuff like that in our playoffs this year. I don't think there's a solution to like who has the best team all year, and then unless you switch to like rotisserie scoring, which stinks.
Yeah, I mean, even in baseball, I think it provides you with maybe the most accurate champion at the end of the year, but it's not enjoyable week to week.
Right. It's there, and like, yeah, sure, we could crown a regular season champion, and I'll definitely support that, especially if we go back into the history and want to pass them down. But I don't know. It's you run the league, but really like you get to pick how we pick our names, and it's a silly game. And I don't know, I'm here to hang out with my friends. And
Yeah,
So I
which is
guess
why.
this is why you don't put money on it.
talking through it, what I'm going to propose, because it is silly and we have all basically just said that it is silly, is it a commit? Because I've never been at the top, so I don't know this. I've only been at the bottom given the assigned name and, having to hear about the theme. Is it a committee, or is it just the first person basically decides and no other person that matters really?
The first person gets to choose the theme, and then the final four in the playoffs get to choose by committee the name
Okay.
for the bottom person.
Great. So I would propose that the regular season champion, if they are not one of the 4 final teams, gets to be a part of that committee. It doesn't matter, but
It doesn't matter. I support that wholeheartedly.
And I would make it then a committee of 2, and it's just the champion in regular season, unless they are the same, in which point then it's the second place team.
Yeah.
And I know
No
that
argument.
I know Libby would just say that a larger group is going to come up with a better name, more creative name, maybe.
Agreed.
But yeah, maybe not.
The committee can always take recommendations from the league.
Yeah.
Sure.
Yeah, and it is funny, or it is a silly, funny thing that we just do. But I think there is something to be said for, and I guess I'm just becoming the Libby stan here. I thought his team was so great. Like, you just went into, I'm sure this had happened in the past before, but I don't remember. And it's maybe just because Tim and I were doing this and it was just week after week, like he put up 140 again, and you just go into matchups. I played him twice or 3 times. And every single time I was like, it doesn't matter how well my team does, I will not win at the end of this. I think I was putting up really good numbers, like 120, high 120s, low 130s. And just by the Sunday night game, I was like, I'm not winning. It doesn't matter.
Well, I think the playoff matchup with him where AJ Dillon almost got you there. I think that was like a 140 to 130 score at the end.
I don't want to get into how my sports fandom has just absolutely destroyed every single team that I've turned on a TV and cheered for over the last month. But I'm going to point to that moment as the moment where it all went downhill, and then Michigan lost, the Packers lost. My mom and dad were at the Badger game last night, and
Oof.
I had been doing other stuff because it was an earlier game, and I was watching the Golden Globes when I got back, and I turned it on for the last little bit after I was checking the score because it was close. As soon as I turned it on, they lost.
Oh,
Hey, the
And
Cubs
so
got
I've
Cody
just been on
Bellinger
this
though.
incredible streak. What? Oh, the Cubs
Cubs
did
got
get,
Cody
yeah,
Bellinger.
Cody Bellinger.
Among
Cubs,
others.
Cubs don't count. The Cubs are devoid of my curse because they were more cursed than I was before. And the the World Series in 16 took it away. But this is not a podcast about me. But yeah, Libby's team was just like, for the people that he drafted, it just worked out as good as it possibly could. Because everyone was like, are the Dolphins with this new young coach going to be good? Is Tua going to be good? Is Tyreek going to be good without? And it's just like, it worked. And then, you go down his roster and it's like, best version of that player, best version of that player, best version, basically all the way down to the point where he had like 2 wide receivers he'd leave on his bench each week after deciding which one to start. And I would have started at least one of them most of the time. It's just, I think it is worth shouting out someone who basically, because our draft is more complicated than just a stupid snake draft where you're like, well, I guess I get this guy now, to just like shout out the guy that clearly just had the best draft.
Yeah. Props. That team was like just a murderer's row.
Yeah, and it's it's just going to be lots of time if we don't give Libby his props. I hope his team next year is just terrible, so that I can just be like, man, do you remember when you had a great team and then still didn't win? That
This leads me to my next topic, which isn't a really topic, but do we do way too early power rankings for 2024 or next season?
I'd be before we even got into that from a team wise, I'd be interested to hear who you guys think, since we don't do a draft, will be the highest paid player, because that also takes into account who you think are going to be keepers. Who do you think is going to be the player next year that has, the big upbid from basically everybody?
Oh, you mean in the draft, not as a keeper?
Yeah, in the draft. I'm saying keeper, you can take that into account because there's a chance that the guy you're thinking of might just be kept and won't be drafted. But someone like, so I'm not going to keep Justin Jefferson because I
that was going to
already
be my
paid
pick.
70 for him. I don't think I'm going to go ahead and keep him for like 85.
It always seems to be a running back. And we can say we got a wide receiver league, but like there's always a running back who's the top paid guy. Maybe it's McCaffrey.
I was thinking that too, especially if
in a much better situation.
Yeah, I'd like to see what he does in the playoffs, but man, he as soon as he got to the Niners, he's just been a stud. And the Niners monstered the Packers in the 2010s. They just absolutely have stolen the Packers' soul, and it does anger me every time. They're just like, man, our quarterback of the future got hurt. Well, we'll just have middling talent at quarterback. We'll kind of struggle at the start of the year, and then we'll just make a big splash to get one of the most talented football players, and then just be awesome.
It's unreal.
It's very disappointing. Very disappointing. Also, Libby, since I'm just your stand. Congrats to Detroit. Too bad you didn't get to make the playoffs for actually showing up and playing a game. But yeah, do you think anyone other than Jefferson, McCaffrey, Ross, if you don't keep Mahomes, is quarterback not? Do you think quarterbacks are gonna go up in value at all, or? Because I'd be interested with like Hurts. What did Hurts go for? Pretty low. He's probably going to be a keeper, wouldn't he?
Let's see what he went for. I thought he actually went for quite a bit. Oh no, he only went for $12. So I would think he's probably a keeper. But again, with two, I really don't know what it's going to look like with two keepers next year. I think that'll change things quite a bit.
It's going to affect the draft.
Yeah.
Because Kupp didn't get put up. Are you going to keep Kupp again?
Probably not. I think the price is going to get pretty high if I do that.
Amari Cooper, I don't think got drafted. I think he was kept. He did?
I think so.
Was it CeeDee Lamb then? Am I getting the wrong Cowboy?
CeeDee Lamb, yeah. CeeDee Lamb got kept.
Okay. Because he was another name that I noticed during the draft. I'm like, oh, I don't get a chance to bet on CeeDee Lamb. That's unfortunate.
Ja'Marr Chase.
Ja'Marr Chase is interesting.
He got kept last year too. I would think Tom probably keeps him again.
Because
maybe it depends. It was $19 this year, so it'd be.
Yes, yeah, I think he's gonna keep Chase.
I don't know why you wouldn't.
Yeah.
I just think the wide receivers are better keeper options. I think the days of the running back bell cow are over compared to like 5 years ago when you'd be getting Dalvin Cook, Christian McCaffrey, Alvin Kamara, Saquon Barkley, or maybe not him, but I don't see running backs being valuable anymore. I really don't.
I think to your point, I think you're probably right, but I think the top three are always going to be like, oh, I guess I want one of those, and that it ends up being more expensive then. especially if you have a decent deal on a wide receiver keeper.
Yeah, and then do you know who throws that all to the wind? Josh Jacobs.
The bell
Yeah.
cow of our generation.
Yeah, but what am I supposed to do with Josh Jacobs? He's in a contract year. His quarterback is gone, so I don't know who the Raiders quarterback is going to be. He is now, I think this is his 4th straight 1,000-yard rushing season. He has an ungodly amount of carries, and the Raiders stink. But I got him for a ridiculous deal. I have no idea what I'm gonna do with that. I don't think I want him. But then so that's
might be
what
worth keeping him and trading him.
nobody trades in this league, so I don't think about that anymore. That's gonna be my number one rule for next year going into the draft, is just assume that's your team, sans roster moves.
Yeah.
I mean,
I think
yeah,
that's
you
probably
can
safe.
make peripheral moves and stuff and maybe get like a 3rd wide receiver, or it's going to be the 1-for-1s. Like, hey, here's my
The
best
1-for-1s
running back for
happen.
your best running back. But it's really tough, I found this year, just because I was in the situation, to like get a number 2 running back, because you're gonna have to give a number 2 wide receiver and probably something else. And at that point, it's like, is it worth it just to have a guy to just consistently start in that 2 spot, or just try and find a wide receiver who can make up for that in the flex? It's tricky.
Yeah, it'll be interesting how the 2 keepers changes things, and we'll see.
But yeah, to power rank the teams for next year, I've got Drew number 1 in my power rankings. I will skip to my number 1. There's no way you can be that bad at fantasy football 2 years in a row. So I am going to guarantee that Drew makes it to the playoffs next year.
Woo. All right. That's
Yeah.
My number 1 is Matthew.
Oh, yep. That's the same logic.
I can't say anything about Matthew anymore.
He has all these like possible keepers. Like, he has just everyone, all the rookies to choose from coming off their first year at like pretty good deals. And he almost made the playoffs. Like,
yeah, almost backdoored in. He's a scary team.
I think if he had made the playoffs, I think his team would have done pretty well. Like, he was putting up pretty high scores throughout those weeks.
Yeah. I mean,
so he's my number 1 going into next year.
Don't make me go down that rabbit hole, Ross. Don't. I'll openly admit I was looking at my scores compared to the teams that were still moving forward in the playoffs.
Oh my.
Yeah.
Did I only lose like my last 1 game and then just won as many playoff games as other playoff teams? Yeah, probably.
The playoff games of Luke's imagination.
Just so much.
Maybe those should count too. Do you want to be on the naming committees because of your imagination games?
What I want ideally at the end of the day is, if we're looking at like, the years and the championships and the Hall of Fame, and how you got them bracketed out, like who won in 2021 and so forth down the list. I want a separate plaque along the other side that's just who Luke thought should have won that year.
my team was really good.
And
that's
then
what that plaque says.
It'll
my team was really good.
It'll be interactive, because for each one of the years, I'll just go through a what if scenario for how my team should have won the championship.
This is like Gruden grinders. Like, nobody really knows how he chooses them, but it's always like you kind of know because the guy. You need to catch your name in Luke's imagination champion.
Yeah, well, I'll workshop that.
You work on that.
But the funniest thing would be that for every single one of those years, my opening statement would be, And this team had the most points scored against them in the entire year, and that was the only reason why they didn't make the playoffs. And
Yep.
if they wouldn't have had so many points scored against them, they would have been a good playoff team. End of rant.
Automatic rule. Automatic rule.
Just the dice didn't roll in their direction.
So Ross, any inclinations about league theme next year? What are you thinking about for that? Is it too early?
I just want to like spend some time with my family and see what the off season brings and yeah, I don't know.
Ross, have you seen the movie Sideways?
I watched half of it.
Okay, so a Paul Giamatti classic, Alexander Payne on the directorship.
Yeah.
Most famous for killing Merlot wine. Because at one point Paul Giamatti yells about how much he hates Merlot and that if anyone drinks Merlot around him, he will leave. Those aren't his exact words, but I'm paraphrasing. If you choose The Office as the theme, I will leave.
So I don't know if I believe you.
There you go. That's my Merlot. Is no Office,
I appreciate
please.
the feedback. Hey, I wanted to shout out some things that I'll remember fondly from this season, if that's okay with you guys.
Yeah.
Just kind of like a soup of things that I was thinking of this morning. Libby's reaction to Tom taking credit for the name of the team, Mr. Buttside, was so funny. Libby did like the Libby classic of he always does this. It just brought me so much joy.
That might have been one of my favorite segments from our show.
So funny. Just such a Libbyism. Obviously Sam's slideshow, like his little brother slideshow, as I call it in my mind, of just ridiculous. I loved it so much. The fact that we discovered Seth is like the Hemingway of our generation. He had this like cryptic message after being the highest scoring team and very silent, and he signed his email with just S once. And I was like, that's such a cool thing to do. I can't pull that off. I liked when Stefan came in with this like deep Seinfeld knowledge that I guess I just didn't know. I had no idea. I don't have that, so I appreciated it. Just coming in with these references for the airing of grievances. It's good to have that guy. Tim, I liked your Andor take, even though I completely disagree, and I liked how angry it made James. It made me so happy. Like I wish you had all been in the same room, because I think you would have had to have the feats of strength and wrestled it out. That would have been so much better.
I loved getting to hold James hostage there, even though I felt a little bad about it. It was a fun thing to do.
I was so happy you didn't tell me you were gonna do that beforehand, because
it was secret.
I think I would have blown it before, because I would have been so excited for it, because I've watched James do this with people in Milwaukee over and over and over again. And it's the same conversation you guys had. It was just like going back to just another night that I've had hanging out with James, where he's just like, I can't even talk to you guys about this anymore.
It was great. I'm so glad you saved that for that moment to share with all of us.
You're welcome.
I don't know if you guys like noticed it, but when Wes came on and you guys did some regular season awards, I think it was, and you were talking about the MVP and like how good Travis Kelce was all year. And Wes just got this smug smile and sat there and listened to all your stats, and it was hilarious. It's just making me giggle thinking about it. I appreciated Lucas expressing his regret about trading Derrick Henry, because that made me very upset. I've been on this hill of like Derrick Henry is not going to be good anymore for like 6 years, and I'm an idiot. But at some point, I want to be right and I want to rub it in his face. But now I can't. I feel sad that Drew doesn't get to choose his name next year, because his name was so good. It was just like the Killers themed football theme. He picked the perfect name. Like there wasn't a better one out there. To be had anywhere.
I think I think he was really quick on it too. He was like one of the first names
Yeah.
up on the page.
Because like, as soon as I went up, and I saw his, and I'm like, mine's just gonna look stupid now. Like, I don't want to do this. Like,
It's
there's
such
gotta be
an
another good one. There
it's
wasn't.
such a sneaky great pull too, because it's like Gettleman he's in the news, but you have to like watch a decent amount of the NFL and like the coverage of it to understand it. Like if you were just a normal like, yeah, I watch football on Sundays kind of watcher of the NFL, you'd be like, what does this mean?
Yeah, but it wasn't so deep that you had to be like, who is that? I've never heard that name. It's like,
Yeah.
even if it's like, oh, that I know the name, like, it's perfect. And Drew, I'm sorry you don't get to pick yours. Matthew's team almost making the playoffs was like such high drama, and I kind of wanted him to make it because it was just like such a backing in, and his team just got on fire at the end of the season. And all these podcasts, I really enjoyed them, and I appreciated your guys' time.
Mostly silent co-host Ciara.
I love whenever Ciara comes in the background. She looks like a cat at first, and then I realize that she's just really far back in the room.
Forced perspective.
Yeah, thank you. This was, I mean, for such a bad fantasy season that I had, this was really the only thing that I had, and it was fun to play producer and do this, even though it was hard to find the time some weeks.
Yeah, I've heard it say that like a good podcast sounds like you're having a drink with your friends, and like this is so silly, but it like this really was like hanging out with my real friends, and so I appreciate it. I appreciate the work, and I'm sure everybody else does too. And same to Libby for the recaps and the commissioner work and coming on here to spit his fire. Appreciate that, and everybody that stayed engaged in this silly game. I value the time that everybody puts in to like hang out with our friends. It's been good.
So
I don't mean to wind down the podcast if you guys have other stuff.
This is it.
I was going to talk very similar to you, Ross, and I was just going to give some of my favorite moments from just doing this because Tim and I have been the only, well, I suppose I haven't been consistent on it because I missed one, but I've been on it. So I was going to say the Andor one if you didn't mention it. That was very, very funny, but it was also like super niche between just the three brothers, one of which isn't even in the league. The other one that got me every time, and it was because he was our guest we had on the most, was Libby. It just killed me every single time that his webcam was like up here. So whenever he looked into camera, he had to do this. And for some reason, it was really, I love talking to Libby and I love it. But it was really hard because it was almost like I was like looking at him like this and asking him questions, and then he would be like, "Yeah, Luke, I thought that was pretty cool." So that got me every time that we had him on. I also wanted to shout out Wes, just from my perspective. I thought he was great every time he came on here, obviously, but then he would also he was the only one that consistently would text me really funny stuff when he was playing my team. So every single time I played Wes, I looked forward to I'm going to get a solid piece of gold during this game. And he was bang on every single time. And we actually had some pretty good matchups when we played. So that was a lot of fun. So shout out Wes for that. Tim, did you have any off the top of your head? Think of a couple more.
The only other thing that I've contributed to the league beyond this podcast is just the discovery of the beautiful word football. It's a noun, it's a verb, it's an adjective, it's a rallying cry. You can say it to be funny. You can say it to be inspirational. It's being able to say it at the end of the podcast is always my favorite part of the podcast. So that's got to be it.
That was weird that naturally just had our rallying cry.
It just happened.
Our conclusion.
It's football. Yeah.
It's why we're here to a certain extent. It is just football. Yeah, I mean, I regretted not being able to have Drew on. I think it would have been really fun to trash his team for a while, or at least get him to explain some of the thinking behind it. So that it's not a highlight because it is a regret, but I do in my imaginary world where I've won all of our league championships, we had Drew on and it was very good.
There's always next
Luke's
year.
pretend guest award goes to Drew.
Drew?
He gave out his pretend championship. His pretend guest award.
Drew, I've talked to you
his
enough in
pretend
my life
angry-
that I can completely imagine a conversation we had about something we didn't have a conversation about. So there you go,
his
Drew.
pretend angry walkout reason. All for pretend football. It's kind of perfect.
Yeah, well, him and I have to come to some conclusion as to us really liking Chris D'Elia for a very long time and how that has become not couth. If you check the news, hopefully Drew watches that and understands what I'm saying. But I think about that quite often whenever I hear the name Chris D'Elia. So there you go, Drew. You are my his cue for. I think of Chris D'Elia. I think of you, buddy.
I can't think of
But
a
yeah,
better way
I mean,
to end the season.
That's all I got. Me just saying something really random to say it.
We'll see you all next year.
Yeah, I'm sure we got to do
Okay,
something
guys.
before the draft, but then we'll do everything after the draft again.
Yep. Football.
Looking forward to it.
Football.
Football.
I watched Star Wars Andor, which was a complete waste of my time. That is 12 hours of my life. This 12 hours of my life I am never going to get back.